Hello, this is Warlord, and we're going to take a look at iClone 7's new Morph Creator, which, as you just saw, allows you to morph objects into something else. Now, there's some rules to morph creation, and they're not that difficult. What I'm doing here is I'm placing what I call the weapon. This is just a rectangular block, and this block was actually made into that sword, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Here is the block that I have labeled as weapon. And then here is the sword. Now, to show you how this works, I'm going to use something here in 3D Max called a morpher. Now, you don't need this morpher in iClone. This is just to show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to come down here and grab the morpher. Then I'm going to grab my source. And now this morphs, as you can see, that block into a sword. Now, if you're in Studio Max, you can have this sword over here anywhere you want. It doesn't matter. And when you do the morph, it's going to be okay because that's just the way it's built. But in iClone, that's different. If you don't want this block to migrate towards this sword as it morphs, then you'll need to move the sword over or whatever your other object is and make sure that it's in the same center as the other one is. That way, when you do press this one, as you can see, it keeps everything coming up in the center in iClone. As I said, in Studio Max, that's not a problem. Now, like I just said, we don't need this morpher at all in iClone. So I'm just going to take it off. All you have to do is export each of these out individually as sword and block, sword and weapon, whatever you'd call them. And that's all you have to do in your 3D application. Make sure they're the exact same poly count. And I'll show you what I mean here. 40. 40. Because like I said again, this just has a modifier on it that makes this sword, this edit poly modifier, out of a block. And then this block over here is just scaled down a little. So, let's go back to iClone. And all I have here is just the block that I exported as an OBJ out of Studio Max, then I brought it into 3D Exchange, and then brought it in as an iClone prop. And that's all it is. We'll come over here, we'll take a look at it, we'll go to Morph Animation, and you'll notice there's no slider. So what we're going to do next is trigger Morph Creator. And if you have an open Morph Creator, it may take a little bit to open the first time. Now, here's our block in Morph Creator, and all we got to worry about is this little plus over here. And wherever you exported your sword to, you go to it, you click on it, Y up in the case of using 3D Max. And then now, as you'll see, we have our morph. Now your morph will be more complicated than this. If you morph a character, you may have the entire character in here as far as eyeballs and everything and have to move several sliders. But in this case, it was very simple. Now up here, send and replace, that would send this whole thing over there, plus leaving our original block, which we don't need. What we need to do is just send the morph to that block. So we're going to update morph to iClone. Now let's see what happens. And look, there's our sword. And of course, this is animatable on the timeline because it has its own morph section there. And it works just like everything else on the timeline. Now this is the lion's head plaque, which I brought into ZBrush, and I think I just used the move tools, and I grabbed the nose and the mouth and did some things with them, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Here are the eyes and the mouth. And then just the mouth itself. You could use that to like hide a secret switch to open a place in a wall in some kind of a catacomb or cavern, or it could be a door knocker or something like that. And this is just using props. Okay, now here we have a cube loaded. Let's go into Morph Creator. Y up. And now you'll see it morphs it in to a smaller cube that has a face and ears on it. Now I'll show you what I mean by send replace to iClone instead of updating the morph. You'll notice now there's two of them. There's our original, and then there's this one that we just morphed. And again, these are animatable on the timeline because they have their own entry. Okay, now here we have a cube loaded. Let's go into Morph Creator. Y up. And now you'll see it morphs it in to a smaller cube that has a face and ears on it. Now I'll show you what I mean by send replace to iClone instead of updating the morph. You'll notice now there's two of them. There's our original, and then there's this one that we just morphed. And again, these are animatable on the timeline because they have their own entry. So let's go over the basics of morphing one more time. What you morph has to have the same poly count. So all of these are 40. They're all the same poly count because they all started from this object here. All I did, like I said, was use a particular modifier to allow me to change it into this shape, and then I reduced it. But all these are the same. So generally what you do is you start off with your basic working block. That would be part A of your morph. And then you turn that in to whatever you want it to be, and that would be part B. Now that's generally how I work when I'm using morphs. That way everything stays the same and you don't have any problem. I hope this helps.